in the sprawling, sun-bleached theology of Los Angeles, where saints are minted on silver screens and sinners confess in the blue glow of a therapist's office, some stories are written in the incandescent ink of ambition and starlight. They are tales of dreams realized, of fortunes made against impossible odds. Others, the stories that whisper from the city's dark corners, are scrawled in the thicker, more permanent fluids of obsession, greed, and blood. The story of Tina Zhang, a name that would become a chilling footnote in the annals of the city's legal history, belongs to the latter. She was a woman who seemed to be the living embodiment of the city's golden promise. At 40 years old, she had returned to the United States in the nascent days of the new millennium. A freshly minted master's degree from a prestigious London university clutched in her hand like a talisman, and a fire in her soul that burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns. She chose Westwood as her kingdom, a neighborhood of leafy streets, erudite students, and the quiet, confident hum of generational wealth. She rented a chic, modern apartment in a secure, high-end building, a fortress of solitude and success. And there, in the heart of LA's West Side, she built a small, thriving empire of her own, tutoring the children of the affluent in classical piano and shaping the language of foreign executives with her business English classes. She worked 7 days a week, a whirlwind of focused, creative energy. Her friends, watching her tireless, relentless schedule, made the easy assumption that she was struggling, another brilliant transplant fighting the city's crushing cost of living, trying to keep her head above the tide of rent and bills. They were wrong. Tina came from a wealthy family in Taiwan, a fact she rarely mentioned. She worked not from the desperation of necessity, but from a ferocious, unquenchable passion for her craft. She worked because the intricate architecture of a Bach fugue and the precise poetry of the English language brought her a joy that money could never buy. She worked to fill her life with the beauty she loved. She was, by all accounts, a dazzling creature. Her beauty was not the cold, intimidating kind so often prized in Los Angeles. It was warm, accessible, radiating from a sweet, disarming smile and a pair of eyes that seemed to hold a galaxy of intelligence and humor. She had the grace of a dancer and a laugh that could fill a room, chasing the shadows into the corners. Men, predictably, were drawn to her light like moths to a flame. They saw in her a rare combination of beauty, intelligence, and a vibrant, self-sufficient spirit. Her well-meaning friends were in a constant state of matchmaking, forever trying to find a man worthy of her, someone who could add to her already brilliant light, not dim it. But Tina's heart was a well-guarded fortress. It was protected by the scar tissue of past betrayals. A high court investigation, in its cold, forensic dissection of her life, would later unearth the ghosts of these relationships. In her late 20s, she had fallen for a charismatic tech entrepreneur, a man with a dazzling vision and a disastrous business plan. She had sold a house she owned, mortgaged her assets, and poured over $500,000 into his dream, a dream that had evaporated into a cloud of bankruptcy and broken promises. He never repaid a dime. The second betrayal came from a handsome airline pilot, a man who navigated the skies with effortless grace, but whose personal finances were a constant turbulent storm. He had entangled her in a web of his own debts, leaving her to untangle a mess of over $100,000. These experiences, these deep financial and emotional wounds, had forged an iron wall around her money. She was open to love, to romance, to the possibility of a shared life. But she had made a solemn vow to herself she would never, ever again mix her heart with her bank account. This deeply ingrained caution, this hard-won wisdom, would later become a critical, unassailable cornerstone in the case against the man who made her vanish from the face of the earth. The afternoon of June 14, 2001, was when the music of Tina Zhang's life abruptly stopped. The silence began. The Westwood Police Department received a call. It was from a man named Kyle, his voice a taut wire of controlled anxiety. He identified himself as Tina Zhang's boyfriend. He was reporting her missing. His words tumbled out, a chronicle of a growing dread. She had left her apartment that morning, he said, a typical Tuesday. But then, nothing. He had texted her around noon. No reply. He had called her an hour later. It went straight to voicemail. He had left a message, then another. He had continued to call and text throughout the afternoon, a frantic, one-sided conversation with a digital ghost. This was not Tina. She was tethered to her phone, a lifeline to her students, her friends, her world. A silence this profound, this absolute, was not an anomaly. It was an aberration. It was a tear in the very fabric of their reality. A knot of cold dread began to tighten in Kyle's gut. It was a primal, instinctual fear that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. The next day, after a sleepless night spent staring at his silent phone, he drove to her apartment building on Westwood Terrace. The building was a fortress, its lobby cool and silent, smelling of polished marble and expensive air freshener. He took the elevator to her floor. The lock on her apartment door was a complex, high-security Medico, a beast of tumblers and steel that she had installed for peace of mind in a city that so often offered none. He fumbled with his own key, but it wouldn't turn. It felt like the lock was jammed from the inside. He called a locksmith, a grizzled veteran with a case full of specialized tools and a lifetime of experience defeating the city's best defenses. The locksmith worked for nearly an hour, his brow furrowed in concentration, his tools clicking and probing. Finally, he straightened up, wiping a sheen of sweat from his forehead. "Sorry, man," he said, shaking his head. "I can't get this thing open. It's like it's been double-bolted from the inside. Never seen anything like it." Kyle's dread, which had been a slow-burning fire, now exploded into a full-blown inferno of panic. That night, his mind a frantic reel of terrible possibilities, he called the fire department. A ladder truck, a behemoth of red steel and flashing lights, arrived on the quiet, tree-lined street, its arrival painting the elegant facade of the apartment building in strobing, frantic strokes of red and blue. A crowd of curious neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, their faces upturned, watching as two firefighters ascended in the truck's basket, rising like mechanized angels to Tina's third-floor window. They forced it open, the sound of splintering wood a sharp crack in the night air. They disappeared inside into the tomb-like silence of Tina's apartment. Kyle followed them, taking the stairs two at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He met the firefighters at the apartment door, which they had opened from the inside. He stepped across the threshold, and the air hit him. It was still. Not just quiet, but utterly, unnaturally still. The air conditioning was off. The temperature was warm and close. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass. The living room was immaculate. The throw pillows on the plush white sofa were perfectly plumped. A stack of magazines was fanned out on the coffee table in a precise, artful arrangement. In the master bedroom, a set of clothes was folded neatly on a velvet armchair. It was a scene of serene, domestic order. It looked as if she had just stepped out for a moment to get the mail and would be back any minute. But the stillness felt wrong. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that presses in on your eardrums. It was the silence of a vacuum. It was in the master bathroom, a space of beige marble and polished chrome, that the creeping sense of wrongness began to take a specific, terrifying shape. Kyle, his eyes darting around the room, trying to find something, anything that would explain this, noticed several things that were out of place precisely because they were missing. The shower curtain, a heavy, cream-colored fabric one she had just bought, was gone. The chrome tension rod it had hung on was also gone. Two large, fluffy bath towels, a matching cream color, that always hung on the heated rack, were gone. The small, plush bath mat that always sat on the marble floor in front of the tub was also gone. And then his gaze fell upon the things that were there, but had no business being there. A large 1-gallon bottle of purified water and a small oscillating electric fan, two items Tina always kept on her bedside table, were now sitting on the bathroom floor, their cords snaking to a nearby outlet. He felt a jolt of pure confusion. It made no sense. His eyes then drifted to the walk-in closet, visible from the bathroom. He saw her shoe rack. Her everyday shoes, a comfortable pair of leather flats she wore for errands, were neatly placed in their designated spot. Tina never went anywhere without those shoes. Why would she leave without her favorite, most comfortable pair? Each small, incongruous detail was another turn of a hidden screw, tightening the vice of fear around his heart until he could barely breathe. Based on Kyle's meticulous report and the deeply unusual, almost surreal circumstances, the Westwood Police Department made a decision. This was no longer being treated as a simple missing persons case. This was something else entirely. They requested a full forensic sweep of the apartment. Dr. Alastair Hansen, the venerable head of the LAPD's Forensic Science Center, arrived on the scene himself. He was a tall, lean man in his late 50s with a shock of silver hair and eyes that seemed to see the world on a microscopic level. He was a man who could read the silent, eloquent stories that blood spatter, dust motes, and trace fibers had to tell. He moved through the apartment with a quiet, deliberate grace, his presence a calm, scientific counterpoint to the emotional chaos of the situation. The family and Kyle had seen nothing amiss in the bathroom. The bathtub and the sink were made of a drab beige-colored cultured marble, a shade that could easily camouflage a stain, absorbing it into its mottled pattern. But Dr. Hansen, his experienced eyes scanning every surface, saw what they had missed. A faint, almost imperceptible discoloration in the white grout line where the tub met the floor. A subtle, shadowy smear under the rolled lip of the sink. He brought out his kit. Taking a small spray bottle filled with a chemical mixture containing luminol, he began to mist the surfaces of the bathroom. Luminol reacts with the iron in hemoglobin, the protein in red blood cells. In the dark, it produces a temporary, eerie chemiluminescence. He killed the lights in the bathroom, plunging the room into near total darkness. And then he began to spray. The effect was instantaneous, theatrical, and utterly horrifying. As the fine mist settled on the surfaces, the room erupted in a ghostly chemical fire. A silent blue-green luminescence bloomed across the beige marble, revealing what the killer had so carefully tried to erase. It wasn't a few spots, it was hundreds of bloodstains, invisible to the naked eye just moments before, now blazed in the darkness. They were like malevolent constellations, a gruesome star chart mapping the final violent moments of Tina Zhang's life. There were fine, atomized sprays on the wall behind the toilet, indicative of a high-velocity impact. There were long, sweeping smears on the side of the bathtub. There were drips and pools under the sink. There was a significant glowing patch on the marble floor beneath the doorframe, where blood had seeped under the door and been scrubbed away from the surface. The killer had done a remarkably thorough job of cleaning. He had wiped, he had scrubbed, he had bleached. But he couldn't erase the ghosts of the iron molecules that had bonded with the porous surfaces. He couldn't defeat the chemistry. DNA testing rushed through the lab, confirmed the inevitable. The blood belonged to Tina Zhang, and there was more. The forensic team, using electrostatic lifting techniques, recovered a clear right palm print from the wall next to the light switch, and a nearly perfect right footprint from a patch of floor near the bathroom door. They did not belong to Tina. Their size and ridge detail indicated they had been left by an adult male. Dr. Hansen stood back in the now-lit bathroom, the glowing stains having faded, and interpreted the grim, invisible tableau for the detectives. The presence of the bottled water and the fan now took on a deeply sinister new meaning. The perpetrator was here for some time after the event, he explained, his voice a low, clinical monotone. The violence was strenuous, he was hot, he was thirsty, the fan was not for comfort. It was a tool. He used it to speed up the drying of the bathroom floor after he had washed away the blood. He gestured around the room. The number and distribution of these stains tell us a story. This was not a minor injury, this was a catastrophic bloodletting event. We estimate, based on the surface area of the stains, a significant volume of blood loss. Well over a liter. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The probability that Miss Zhang survived an injury that produced this amount of blood loss is, in my professional opinion, statistically 0. This isn't a missing person's apartment. This is a murder scene. The killer just took the body with him. The lack of forced entry was a critical fact. The killer was not an intruder. He was an invitee. He was someone Tina knew, someone she trusted enough to buzz him through the building's security, to unlock the complex deadbolt on her apartment door. The evidence, Dr. Hansen explained, suggested a clear sequence of events. The primary assault likely occurred in the master bedroom. Then the killer dragged her body into the bathroom, where the hard, cleanable surfaces were better suited for the gruesome work that followed. The missing shower curtain, The towels, the bath mat, they were not just missing. They had been repurposed. They were used to wrap her body, to soak up the blood, to create a makeshift disposable container to transport her from the apartment without leaving a trail of drips in the hallway. The male palm print and footprint sealed the theory. The killer was a man Tina knew. The investigation, now a full-blown homicide case, turned its focus to Tina's finances. If the motive wasn't a random burglary, then it was likely personal, and personal often meant money. Detectives began the painstaking work of pulling her bank records, her credit card statements, her investment portfolios, and there, in the cold, hard data of her financial life, they found him. On the 5th day after she had vanished on June 19th, a series of significant withdrawals had been made from her primary checking account. Thousands of dollars, withdrawn in neat sequential increments just under the daily ATM limit. The bank's security camera footage was crisp and clear. The person at the ATM, her face partially obscured by a baseball cap and sunglasses, was a middle-aged woman with short, dark hair. Using facial recognition software and cross-referencing DMV records, it didn't take the detectives long to put a name to the face. Her name was Maya Chen. When two plainclothes detectives knocked on the door of her modest suburban home, Maya Chen was the picture of composure. She invited them in, offered them water. She was calm, almost serene, her face an unreadable mask. When they showed her the still image from the ATM camera, she didn't flinch. "Yes, that's me," she said, her voice even. She explained that her brother, Leo Chen, had asked her to withdraw the money. It was for a business matter, a time-sensitive investment. Her brother, she told them, lived in Beijing. He was a successful entrepreneur managing a factory that manufactured high-end home appliances. And then, almost as an afterthought, she revealed the crucial, damning piece of information. When her brother Leo was in Los Angeles on business, which was often, he frequently borrowed her private car, a late-model dark blue Toyota Camry. The detectives' minds raced, the disparate pieces of the puzzle suddenly snapping together with a sickening click. An attack in an apartment, a body wrapped in a shower curtain, and a car, a means of transport, a way to make a body disappear into the vast, anonymous sprawl of Southern California. They asked Maya Chen to accompany them to the Westwood precinct for further questioning. She agreed without protest. With her full witnessed consent, the forensic team, led once again by the indefatigable Dr. Hansen, descended upon her Toyota Camry, which was parked in the subterranean evidence garage of the police headquarters. The entire process was meticulously documented on video, with Maya herself present as a witness. This was, as Corrigan would later say, procedural armor. It would make the evidence they found unassailable, immune to the inevitable legal challenges that a rich and powerful suspect would mount. Dr. Hansen began his examination. The interior of the car to the naked eye was immaculate. It smelled faintly of cherry air freshener. But Hansen's world was the world of the unseen. He started with the front passenger seat. He carefully removed the decorative bamboo seat cover, and underneath, on the fabric of the seat itself, he found the first telltale stain, a dark brownish smear, no bigger than a quarter. He moved to the back seat, another stain. Then he moved to the trunk. He popped it open. The air inside was stale. On top of a folded silver sunshade, there were more dark stains, a scattered pattern of drips. He carefully lifted the sunshade. On the gray, carpeted mat that lined the bottom of the trunk, there were more, much larger stains soaked deep into the fibers. With a grunt of effort, he and another tech pulled the entire heavy mat out of the trunk. And there, on the bare, painted metal floor of the trunk itself, was the final, irrefutable proof. A massive smeared stain of dried, blackened blood. It was the shape of a human torso. Dr. Hansen, his voice low and grim, explained the brutal physics of what they were seeing. If a person is alive, even if they're bleeding and tied up in a trunk, the blood pools. It flows downwards. But this, He gestured to the layered evidence. This is a permeation event. The blood has soaked through the sunshade, through the thick carpeted mat, and pooled on the metal floor. This requires two things: a significant volume of blood and time. This tells us a body already dead or in the final stages of exsanguination was placed here. Its life fluid, under the simple force of gravity, leaked out, seeping through layer after layer. The amount of blood we are seeing in this vehicle, combined with the amount of blood we documented in the apartment, leads to only one possible conclusion. He looked directly at Detective Corrigan. We can now state with a very high degree of scientific certainty that Tina Zhang was murdered. Her killer used this car to transport her body. He wrote his official report. He formally proposed that the investigation be reclassified from a missing persons case to a homicide, with Liu Chen as the primary and only suspect. The LAPD, through Interpol and the State Department, reached out to Liu Chen in Beijing. His sister Maya relayed their requests. They asked him to return to Los Angeles voluntarily for questioning. He refused. He was a busy man, he said. He had a factory to run. For 3 long, frustrating months, he remained a phantom on the other side of the world, protected by distance and international jurisdiction. Corrigan and the DA's office knew they had to force his hand. They played a strategic high-stakes card. They formally charged his sister, Maya Chen, as an accessory to murder. They alleged that she had knowingly provided her vehicle to be used in the commission of a felony and the disposal of a body. The news was leaked to the press. The tactic was a calculated risk, but it worked. Liu Chen, perhaps feeling a flicker of familial loyalty, or more likely operating under the arrogant assumption that without a body the American legal system was powerless against him, finally agreed to return. On September 12, 2001, he strode through the arrivals gate at LAX as if he were arriving for a business meeting. He was flanked by a high-priced lawyer in a suit that cost more than a detective's monthly salary. Leo himself was dressed in expensive, casual clothes, a man radiating an unshakable, infuriating belief in his own invincibility. In the stark, windowless interrogation room at the Westwood precinct, he was a wall of cool, practiced denial. He claimed he barely knew Tina Zhang, a casual acquaintance, nothing more. They had met through friends, he said, after his divorce 2 years prior. They had lost touch. He claimed he had only just learned from the police that she had another boyfriend. It was a performance of detached indifference. When Corrigan pressed him about the money, about the ATM withdrawals, he spun a tale of business and investment. He said Tina was a brilliant woman who recognized a golden opportunity. She had willingly, even eagerly, given him her ATM and credit cards. She wanted to invest, he claimed, to get in on the ground floor of his new, wildly successful company in China. It was a lie the court would later shred, citing Tina's deep-seated, well-documented financial trauma and her ironclad rule about never, ever mixing her finances with men. Corrigan laid out the surveillance records. The data from traffic cameras and cell tower pings that placed his sister's car, the car he admitted to borrowing, on the Pacific Coast Highway, heading north towards the desolate, cliff-lined coast of Malibu, late on the night of June 14th. The night Tina disappeared, a time when most of the city was asleep. It was a classic route for someone looking to make something, or someone, disappear into the vast, unforgiving Pacific. Leo had an answer for that, too. His story was ready, rehearsed. He claimed he was going to visit a friend, a former business associate who lived in a secluded house in the Malibu hills. He even gave them a name. The police, of course, had already checked. The friend did indeed live there. But when detectives had knocked on his door, the man had been adamant. He hadn't seen or heard from Liu Chen in over 5 years. He certainly had not received a late-night visit from him on June 14th. Confronted with this, Leo's smooth facade showed the first tiny crack. He didn't panic. He just adjusted his story. He said he had driven all the way to his friend's house, a long, winding drive up into the dark hills. But when he got there, he looked at the time and decided it was simply too late to disturb him. So, he claimed, he just turned the car around in the man's driveway and drove all the way back to Los Angeles without even getting out of the car. It was a pathetic, transparent lie, the kind a teenager tells his parents when he breaks curfew. Corrigan pushed the photographs across the table. Close-ups of the palm print and footprint from the bathroom. Your prints, Leo, in her bathroom. How do you explain that? Leo glanced at the photos and offered an explanation so bizarre, so ludicrous. It was almost breathtaking in its audacity. He claimed he had been at Tina's apartment earlier that day. She was standing on her bathroom scale, and he, being a curious man, had squatted down on the floor to get a closer look at the number. The handprint was from him steadying himself against the wall. The footprint was from his shoe as he squatted. It was a detail so strangely intimate, so physically close, it sounded more like a twisted confession of proximity than a plausible denial. Finally, Corrigan played his ace. He laid out the forensic photos of the blood in his sister's car, the layered, permeated stains, the massive smear on the metal floor of the trunk. This is Tina's blood, Leo. A lot of it, in the car you were driving. How did it get there? For the first time, Leo Chen had no ready answer. He just shrugged, a small, dismissive gesture. He disclaimed all responsibility. And then, with a sneer of pure contempt, he looked Corrigan in the eye and had the gall to suggest that he was being framed. That the LAPD, in their desperation to solve a high-profile case, had planted the evidence. He was operating under a simple, deadly, and deeply flawed calculus. No body, no murder weapon, no crime. He believed he was smarter than all of them. But he had fatally underestimated the power of science and the tenacity of a justice system determined to make a point. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office knew they were on treacherous legal ground. Prosecuting a murder case without a body, the corpus delicti, was a rare and incredibly difficult feat. The entire case would rest on circumstantial evidence, but the evidence they had, they believed, was overwhelming. In June of 2003, nearly 2 years to the day after Tina Jiang vanished from her life, the DA formally charged Leo Chen with her robbery and murder. The prosecution's case, presented in the hushed, solemn atmosphere of the LA County Superior Court, rested on 3 unshakable pillars. The first was the forensic evidence, the massive, undeniable quantity of Tina's blood found in 2 separate locations, her sanitized apartment and the car he had used, which created a powerful, logical inference that she had suffered a fatal injury. The second was Leo's complete and utter inability to provide any reasonable, believable explanation for the presence of that blood. His lies were so flimsy, so contradictory, they served only to highlight his guilt. And the third pillar was motive. The security footage of him and his sister systematically draining her bank account in the days immediately following her disappearance. It painted a clear picture of a cold-blooded robbery that had escalated to murder. In the first trial, the jury, after deliberating for 3 days, returned a guilty verdict. The judge, citing the brutal and calculated nature of the crime, sentenced Leo Chen to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But Leo, ever the arrogant fighter, appealed. In the second trial, before a panel of appellate judges, his lawyer tried a new, desperate tactic. He argued that the police had coerced Maya Chen, that they had violated Leo's rights, that the blood evidence in the car was inadmissible because it had been planted, but the prosecution was ready. They played the complete, unedited video of the car's inspection, showing a calm Maya Chen witnessing every step, freely giving her consent. The planting theory, his last-ditch effort, collapsed in on itself. The appellate judges were not impressed. They saw a man who showed no remorse, a man who was still trying to lie and manipulate his way out of a crime he had so clearly committed. They saw his contempt for the court, for the process, for the truth itself. In a stunning and highly unusual move, they ruled that the initial sentence had been too lenient. Citing his lack of remorse and his attempts to obstruct justice, they increased his sentence. They sentenced him to death. Leo Chen's journey through the legal system was not over. He appealed again, this time to the California State Supreme Court, his last resort. The highest court in the state reviewed the labyrinthine case. They upheld the conviction, but they took issue with the death sentence. In their final ruling, they noted that Leo's decision to return to Los Angeles from the safety of China, even if prompted by his sister's legal peril, showed that he still possessed what they termed a shred of conscience. It was a slim, almost invisible reed of humanity in a vast, dark ocean of monstrosity. But it was enough. The court, citing this shred of conscience as a mitigating factor, commuted his sentence. They reinstated the initial verdict. Liu Chen was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. He would die behind bars. The case of Tina Jiang became a landmark, a watershed moment in California's judicial history. It was the first time a murderer had been convicted in a no-body case, a triumph of forensic technology and logical inference over a killer's cunning attempts to erase his crime, but it was a victory that felt hollow, incomplete. Liu Chen, to this day, sits in a maximum security prison, a man growing old with his secrets. He has never revealed what he did with Tina's body. He has never told anyone where she rests. He holds the final, agonizing piece of the puzzle, and he has never given it up. For Tina's family, the pain is a constant, an open wound that can never heal. They have a conviction, they have justice of a sort, but they have no grave to visit, no place to leave flowers, no final quiet spot to say goodbye. Their brilliant, vibrant daughter simply vanished into the hands of a predator, and he has never ever given her back. And in the years that followed, strange, unsettling stories began to circulate among the officers and staff at the Westwood precinct, whispers in the quiet hours of the night shift. While Maya Chen's dark blue Toyota Camry was being held in the cavernous, climate-controlled evidence garage in the basement of the police headquarters, the night guards began to report strange occurrences. More than one swore they would see a figure, a woman with dark hair, sitting silently in the back seat of the impounded car, visible only for a moment in the sweep of their flashlight beams. Others reported hearing the faint, unmistakable sound of a woman crying, a soft, desolate sobbing that seemed to emanate from the empty, sealed car itself. The sounds, they said, would only stop after the car was finally moved to a different off-site facility. The stories became a piece of precinct folklore, a ghost story born from a real-life horror. 2 years after the case was officially closed, a detective sergeant, a man who had been on the initial response team, returned to Tina's old apartment on Westwood Terrace. It was now occupied by new tenants, a young couple who knew nothing of its dark history. The detective was there to take some follow-up photographs for a training manual on circumstantial evidence cases. He set up his equipment. But when he stepped into the master bathroom, the same bathroom where the blood had bloomed under Dr. Hansen's chemical spray, his high-end digital camera malfunctioned. The screen went black. It wouldn't turn on. He stepped back out into the bedroom, frustrated, and the camera immediately powered on, working perfectly. He thought it was a fluke. He tried again. He stepped across the threshold into the bathroom, and again the camera died instantly. He tried a second camera, a different brand, a different battery. The exact same thing happened. It was as if some unseen residual energy in that small, sterile room, some silent, grieving presence, refused to be photographed, a ghost still guarding the sacred, blood-stained ground of her own violent end, forever trapped in the place where her vibrant life had been so brutally extinguished.